Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of our Young Leaders webinars. Today, we have with us Ms. Steliana Moraru, and currently she holds the position of Head of Growth Financial Services at TotalSoft, leading international expansion and strategic development. In previous lives, she was Chief Operations Officer at a major bank, where she managed complex operations and digital transformation initiatives across Central and Eastern Europe. She has a solid expertise in strategic management, operations, digital transformation, marketing, and corporate social responsibility. She's a business coach, she's university lecturer and mentor with nearly 10 years of teaching experience. She has a PhD in communication sciences, and she's been certified by Harvard, MIT, and Maastricht School of Management. She's a strong advocate for women in leadership, diversity, and inclusion, and she serves on the boards of Carierista.org, Global Women Tech Leaders, and UniHub. Ms. Moraru, with such an impressive resume, we thank you so much for joining us. And it's very important to say that your presentation for today has been guided by the questions that our young leaders have sent you in advance. So thank you to all those who have contributed. And now, Ms. Moraru, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. That was a very impressive presentation. Thank you for outlining all my hats. And indeed, I'm actually really proud and lucky to be able to have such great experience. What I would like to emphasize about myself and my bio is that I've always strive to find change. So for me, change comes very naturally. So this is why you can find in my CV and in my resume C-level jobs, growth jobs, as the one I have right now, public administration jobs that I was just about to mention. That at the beginning of my career, actually, I worked for the Ministry of Communication here in Romania. I have experience in NGOs, big corporations, groups, SMEs. So basically, the red thread of my career was the need to change. And this type of change came from the fact that I always wanted to remain relevant. And I actually think this is important for you as well. If you want to take a lesson learned from somebody that's a little bit older than you are or a little bit more senior. One thing I've always been preoccupied by is how to remain relevant as a professional. So this is why I always try to have like a puzzle of skills, not to focus only on one skill. Also, I'm a very social person and I really enjoy working with people and with teams. And actually, while working with the OTP group, so my previous jobs, I actually discovered this passion in a professional way. And I discovered I can be really good at transformation. So to help companies and teams make further steps into the future. So this is why I joined TotalSoft. For those of you who don't know, so TotalSoft is one of the biggest Romanian companies, but also it's a regional player as well. We have software products and we cater to various industries. And in my current role, speaking of transformation and reconstruction and remaining relevant, this is actually my job right now, how to transform TotalSoft and how to make them relevant for the future. Also, besides my current job, because you've mentioned my involvement in nonprofits, and this is something that's very close to my heart, and it's very aligned with my mission besides my professional life. I teach, I'm a lecturer. I've been teaching leadership, management, and entrepreneurship here in Romania at two universities, currently at the University of Bucharest. And it really, really gives me a lot of energy when I meet young people like you, and this is why I always volunteer to come to such events, because I find them always very inspiring for myself as well. It's always a learning experience for myself as well. Not only, me sharing with you, but also, taking back from you. So thank you, young generation, for being so interesting and with so much energy and great ideas. And secondly, again, aligned with my personal mission. So this one with the teaching. The second one is for women. And I think what is relevant for our context to share is that I come from a very, very small town in Romania. I was raised by a single mom. So my background is very modest. I was very poor, just to put it very bluntly in front of you. So I come from a very, very modest family, raised by a single mom in a small city. So, everything aligned from this point of view. Nevertheless, I learned quite early that education, projects, volunteering, the ability to network and to learn from the others can be instruments for me to grow and to move past my, family limitations. Now that I'm, grown up and a professional, I wanted to give it back, to the people that kind of helped me be where I am. So this is why I'm either involved or develop projects, especially for women, because I always think about my mom and how she raised me and all the sacrifices she made for me and for me to get to this point in my life. But also to give a chance to all the young ladies or the young girls like myself, my younger self, to grow and to find new opportunities. So for me, this is really important and something that's embedded in my personal DNA. So this is why I always help whenever I can, and I volunteer for causes related to women and girls. Good. So this is my background. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer to them. Nevertheless, I've got your questions and they're very interesting. So my proposal for you was to answer all them. But before that, if you have other questions or if you like to tackle into any subject, I'm an open book. So feel free to ask.
I think that sounds like a good plan. I think starting with the questions that have already been asked and to get the ball rolling, and then I'm sure they'll think of other questions from the discussion.
Perfect. So from my side, just feel free to interrupt me or to address any questions. I like to be flexible. And the most important thing for me is to, for you to get the information that is valuable for you. So feel free to tap at any moment into the conversation. I have your questions here. I don't know if they are in a particular order. I just start with what order I received. And actually, the first one is related to women. So I'm going to start with that. So somebody asked, what did women leadership mean then versus now? Are there any differences in how advocacy is done? Well, this is such a great question. And actually, it's a little bit of a more complex answer. I'll try to simplify as much as possible. But I would like to make a step back a little bit. And first of all, to invite you to think a little bit about the challenges women face. They are kind of rooted in historical and social inequalities. For those of you studying a little bit of philosophy or studying political science, for sure you know the concept of oikos and polis from Aristotle. So basically oikos meaning home and polis meaning public sphere. And back in those days, these two concepts were actually the one that actually separated women, like, women being assigned domestic roles versus men who had public responsibilities. This kind of separation, the theory of distinct spheres, is actually something that persisted until the second wave of feminism, which is in 1950s, so very close to to our time and age. And in the second wave of feminism in the 50s was actually how to say, very question this boundaries and limitations women had, and also open doors for women to access higher education and paid work. So leadership, at least from my point of view, we kind of need to look at the history and what limitations we had based on the history. Now, particularly looking at management and leadership, I think back in those days, leadership was largely about breaking barriers, right? Because we had these separate concepts, we had assigned a certain roles. So for us as women leaders or wannabe leaders, we kind of had to break the barriers, these kind of limitations, to achieve basic recognition. For example, for those of you who are going to study leadership, you are going to see there is this theory in leadership, which is called the theory of the great man. It's from the beginning of the 19th century or 20th century. I can't remember exactly. Nevertheless, it's one of the first theory about leadership. And the author said, and that only men were taking into consideration. This is why the great man theory, because women didn't have the capacity to think or to be leaders. So going back to what I was saying, so leadership was about breaking barriers, achieving basic recognition, achieving basic access and representation. Because in one capacity or another, you are in public sphere or you aim to work in the public sphere. Just think about the vote rights. There are countries in Europe that gave women the right to vote quite in the 70s, for example, the Switzerland, they gave women the right to vote in the 70s, which is again very, very close to us. So I guess leadership in history, it's a little bit more about actually fighting primarily to get a seat at the table, and most of the time quite confrontational. Just think about the suffragette, the women who fought for women to get the right to vote. Now, I think it's kind of a bit of a shift. We are still, based on the numbers, not equal in leadership. Nevertheless, I think we kind of made an upgrade, and leadership is not only about representation anymore. It's more about empowerment, how to build inclusive environments, how to be transformative leaders. And I think if I would think about advocacy, I would say that the channels we have are a little bit broader right now. We have digital platforms, we have social media, we have networking, and all this help us amplify our voices and kind of accelerate the changes we need. Nevertheless, I think in terms of leadership, men versus women, we are still trying to find the balance. And there are certain concepts related to women leaders, and there are two of them, maybe just to give you, just to have for future reference, is the famous glass ceiling. So basically that there are certain roles in top levels jobs that women didn't make it, like presidents or C-level jobs. But there are two other concepts that are related to leadership and men versus women. The second concept is called the glass cliff. So basically, is that situation where a woman is brought in as a leader, but in a crisis situation, so that if she's not able to manage that crisis, the company or the organization can blame it on her, although she's not responsible for that crisis. And the third concept I'd like to share with you is the glass elevator. So basically, it refers to leadership roles in fields where you have a lot of women, like social workers, health fields, education. So basically, where you have a big number of women working in different roles, but a very small number of women having leadership positions. So this discussion is quite complex, and even in our days, although we have this shift, so where we are talking about empowerment more and representation, we still have a lot of fights to fight, unfortunately, on this side. And this is why, at least myself, I'm an advocate for women. Of course, I'm also an advocate for allyship. So basically, I don't see women without men. I think we should have partnerships and we should work as allies. Nevertheless, I decided to invest more in women programs because, at least in Romania, I've noticed that women have even more challenges, especially if they come from rural locations or small cities. So this is my personal take on that. If you have any questions or you like clarification or anything?
I don't see any raised hands, so I think we can move on to the next question.
Okay, so the next one is, did the women empowerment movement shape the way we approach women leadership these days? Well, I think I kind of a little bit answered in my previous question. What I think I would add here is, if I think about the women empowerment, I would definitely think about changing societal attitudes in the sense that the movements, voting movements, civil rights movements, equal rights movements, feminism, women in tech, women in leadership movements, I think they kind of normalized female leadership. And I think they kind of enabled the younger generation to visualize women in influential roles. One of my most frequent examples I give to teams or organizations I work with, and they want to be more open, more diverse, more inclusive, is that the young generation needs women models, right? Because it's kind of hard to imagine that you can achieve a certain role, especially as a woman or as a man. You can, I mean, it's a bit harder to imagine how to have inclusive teams if you don't have some role models. And one exercise I always do with people is to ask them to close their eyes and to imagine a CEO. And I will do this exercise with you as well right now. Just, close your eyes, or, and think about the CEO for like a couple of seconds. Or a president, let's see, a president or a CEO. What do you imagine? Be honest, whatever comes to mind. There is no right or wrong answers here. So, how do you imagine a CEO?
Weirdly, like Elon.
Like Elon. So basically, someone that's a man, first of all, and then that has an aggressive attitude or a very pushy and fighting attitude. Okay. Other answers?
I would say for me at least, like when you said executive, like it was like a white male, but like once you switched it to president, I'll be honest, they kind of switched to like Maya Sandu or like Hillary Clinton. So like I think the political dimension kind of like switched it towards like women versus just like the purely like, like business finance aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, great. Other inputs? I'm actually curious.
Because we were talking about women in leadership specifically, I was like subconsciously like kind of pushing towards women leaders, and I couldn't think of the name of a single woman CEO just like on the spot. But once it got to political, Angela Merkel came up as my first like leader, and then Hillary Clinton did too, but she never became president.
Great, thank you. But actually, it's very, I mean, it's encouraging for me to hear that in politics you are able to associate politics with women. I'm not very familiar with other countries, so I will only refer to Romania. Unfortunately, in Romania, I have some really great friends, women politicians, and some of them, for example, they decided to switch jobs and to come to the private sector and to move from politics to the private sector. And actually, right now in the Romanian parliament, I think there are like only 15% women, which is a drop from 30% or something like this. So basically, we are in a reverse engineering in a bad way, unfortunately. So it gives me a little bit of hope that when you think about a president or politicians, you also think about women. And I think I would make here a quick highlight, because speaking of women in politics, my personal belief is that we do need more variety and diversity in politics, because politics is about the entire population, right? And you have half of the population being women, and women are having some particular situation. And you might be a little bit young, but I'm just going to give this example. For example, women become moms. Okay, right? You have a partner, or you have a family. Nevertheless, for example, you need special rooms in the company or in the parliament to be able to feed the baby. And this is something only a woman can, think of it, right? Because even if you are a very involved partner as a man and you care about your family and you want to there are certain situations that only women can understand and they can think about it. And I will give you an example that was for me like an idea that made me think why we need actually more women in politics. It's not from politics, it's from the corporate world. I was reading a book, it's called Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. Sheryl Sandberg is considered one of the most influential women in the world. She was the chief operating officer of Facebook. She's one of my role models, by the way. And she shares in this book that she was working at Google, I think, and she became pregnant, right? And she used to park her car in the parking lot, which was very, very far away from the building. So she became pregnant, and it's a little bit difficult, physically speaking. So she realized that she should propose a company policy, at least for the women who are pregnant, for them to be given the right to have like a closer parking spot. And this is why I think, going back to politics, when we bring diversity to the table, I think we can think of more inclusive public policies, and we can think a little bit in a more holistic way, right? Women also are the ones who make, even now, a lot of unpaid work. For example, they are the primary caretakers. They are the ones who take care of the home and so on. And basically, it's like having another job. So when we think about public administration, from my point of view, and having in mind these examples, we also need a lot. We also need a very balanced representation of women, because we kind of need to think about policies that cater to everyone, not just to a part of the population. Okay, so going a little bit, sorry, I divagated a little bit, but this is an important topic for me. So I was mentioning that I think the empowerment is a lot about changing societal attitudes. I also think, and I mentioned briefly, it's about promoting this kind of policy changes, but not only on the administration side, but also on the corporate side and other organizations. I also think it kind of brought a little bit more of, if I can say it, I don't know, intentional hiring, and a little bit more transparency in the way we do things as corporations. And what I think, and especially talking about leadership, maybe there is also like a shift in the leadership narrative, in the sense that studies shows that women leadership styles are more about empathy, collaboration, communication, holistic decision making. These kind of traits were used to be considered like very feminine or very soft, but nowadays they are very sought after leadership traits, no matter if you are like a man or a woman, because we live in a world that is fast changing. So we kind of need collaboration, good communication. We need to be able to collaborate very, very well between us. So this is what I would say that empowerment movements brought to leadership today. Okay, so the next question is, who or what inspired you to become a leader in fields considered man-dominated? Okay, that's a really great one. This is a bit more personal. Actually, as I mentioned earlier, so one of my main models is my mom, my mom. So she is my primary role model, for me at least. And she's the one actually who inspired me to pursue a career, to not be limited of who I am at a certain moment in time, and to always pursue education. So basically, she instilled this in me. So for me, she is my primary role model, and is the person to whom I'm referring to these days. Afterwards, after I moved to Bucharest, actually in the beginning, it wasn't quite a very planned thing. Actually, so I actually started in public administration, I've told you. It was a pure coincidence. I actually applied to a program. So basically, this is how I ended up in public administration. I applied to a program for young students, and they saw something in me and they hired me. So basically that was it. And there I had some like really, really great women I worked with. So I would definitely refer to them. The minister was a man, but the ladies, so the person I was working with directly were women. And they are very strong, very smart women, very forward thinking. Actually, they were the ones who opened my mind about technology, because actually I was studying another subject. I was studying communication actually. And they were the ones who opened my mind for technology, and I shifted my interest. And then because I started working in technology, I didn't actually think a lot that I'm a woman and I can't make it. I had my resilience mindset from my own upbringing, in the sense that I knew if I was able to get out of the small town and being the big city, I can do anything. So I kind of had this mindset. It was a little bit, foolish and thinking back, but it kind of helped me. So I started working in tech. And the mindset I had, I need to do the best what I can. And I think I was a little bit lucky as well, because also in tech, I encountered a lot of great women, but also a lot of great men. Men that, unlike Elon Musk, for example, because you gave me Elon Musk, men that actually, encourage diversity, that didn't make this like a weird thing to do, and they were like really, really allies. So basically I think I was a little bit lucky, because I found myself also in a good environment with really good role models. And then I switched to financial services, which is also, at least in Romania, it's also dominated by men. And I had another layer actually, and it was the first time when I encountered this. I was also the youngest. So in financial services, especially in the management side, again, in Romania at least, most of the managers are actually men. And I was a young woman. So the difference between me and the next colleague in the management team was 10 years. So basically, I was like 10 years younger than the youngest colleagues I had in the management team. Also, because I worked in an international group, in many cases, I was the only woman at the table, like in CE. And actually, that was, I think, the first time that, and I think I gave this example with another occasion, but I think it's important. So that was the first time when I realized that, hey, I'm kind of alone in this environment and with all these white men, really great men. Again, I had my colleagues are really, my former colleagues are really great, but it's a very difficult sentiment to be in a room full of people that they don't look like you. They are not blonde. They are not women. They come from other countries. And I do remember actually at the first board meeting I went, I was the only woman, again, very young. And I was actually panicked. And I had a mentor. And I called her and I said, hey, look, I'm at this board meeting. I was about to go to the board meeting. I'm really panicked. I don't know what, I'm a little bit like freezing, like mental freezing, and I'm very anxious. I'm with all these people that they have like a lot of knowledge. They were also like very senior in the company. I'm very young. I also new to the financial services, so I was like having all the things. So I was kind of panicking. And she said to me, and she said, okay, I understand. It's, it's a little bit normal to feel a little bit anxious about this. Nevertheless, switch the perspective. And instead of thinking that you're the only one in the room that's a woman and it's young, and here you can use, because we also have like young boys here, you might find yourself in similar situation, like, in a singular situation. So it's not only for the women in our group, also for the boys. And she said, switch the perspective. Instead of focusing of who you are and what makes you different in a negative perspective, think of what makes you different in a positive perspective. So you are a young person. That's great. You can come with new ideas, with creative ideas, with fresh ideas, right? You represent the new generation. They don't represent the new generation. They are, okay, very good people, but senior people, right? Then you are a woman. Bring that to the table. You can bring challenges women have in financial services, right? You can bring this unique perspective about women finance. And third, you come from Romania, so you can bring to the table a specific set of knowledge that they don't have. This was actually one of the best advice I received, and kind of, switch my my mind a little bit. And it's something I share a lot, because sometimes we kind of need to switch the perspective and to think, instead of, hey, I'm the only one in the room with ABC traits. Okay, how can I use those ABC traits into my own advantage and move forward? So yes, and so this was my bumpy road in finance, because this was very, very challenging for me as well. After I kind of switched and got into the vibe of it, I didn't have a lot of challenges. Nevertheless, I invested in myself, how to present myself, how to speak, how to have this kind of executive presence, how not to get deterred about certain affirmations and things like that, because they can happen. So this is actually the story, or my personal story on that. And now I work in technology again. But I feel a little bit more, I I still have my own anxieties. I'm not going to lie to you. Actually, I'm in my first month of job here, and I'm, freaking out a little bit about certain things. Because it's a new job, new environment, new colleagues, new challenges. So I think
That's because it's not paralyzing. This is like a fuel that
no, it's like
motivates
the
you and
fuel.
helps you move on.
Exactly. It's like the fuel. It's still there, but nevertheless, I'm using exactly my previous experience to transform everything. So again, switching the perspective, thinking on how can I use everything I know in the event of in my own advantage and the company's advantage, of course. Okay. I have a question here. Is how do you establish a narrative of change, transformation in a professional team as a goal? Everyone is keen to follow. Okay, so basically, if I understand correctly, so how we drive transformation towards an objective and how we onboard everyone. I think this is the question. Okay, so this is actually my specialty, as I was sharing with you beforehand. The red thread, how to make transformation and to how teams work towards the same goal. Based on my experience, what I would say first and foremost would be to give clarity on purpose and vision. More precisely, is to communicate or to clearly communicate the why behind the change. And that this why should be translated into how it benefits the organization, how it benefits the individual. If you clarify this, of course, you still have detractors. By the way, this is going to be in every project. Nevertheless, you are going to win more ambassadors and more people willing to at least try. So myself, when I make, and this is something I do right now, we have a reconstruction project, a transformation project for the division I work in. I've started with clarifying the purpose, why we do this transformation and why it's necessary. What's the bigger vision for the future, and why we are doing it, and what's in it for the people. So how this vision and this purpose is going to help them. I would also add here the ability to maintain consistency in communication. So, for example, to reinforce messages frequently, right? To communicate in a transparent way, even if we need to deliver harsh messages. To have consistency. Also, in communication is not always important what we tell, what we share, but also what comes back to us. So I would also say it's important to develop your ability to listen very actively, to be open to receive feedback, and also to be a little bit flexible in adjusting the course in a transformation project, because you don't have all the answers from the beginning. So you kind of need to keep a little bit of flexibility there. Then, because we are talking about leadership, I think in a transformation project, it's really important to lead by example. So and also aligning what you are saying with what you are doing as a leader, because people look at you, and in a lot of situations, not only in transformation project, but when you are in a leadership role, you'll see that if you demonstrate commitment, if you demonstrate all the good traits you are talking about, people will follow more easily because they have you as their model, right? in a change project or in a transformation project, I think leading by example should be through visible, actions, sharing. In leadership, we are talking a lot about vulnerability these days. And just to give you, to understand the concept, just for example, I shared with you my origin story, which is, not something I share with everyone or, everywhere. Of course, I didn't share all the details with you. Nevertheless, this is the type of example of sharing vulnerability and showing authenticity. And I would advise you to find your own vulnerable spots that you can share with the others, especially in transformation projects, because they are going to become more relatable to you and you are going to be more relatable to them. And last but not least, I would also say that I would actually add also this would be able to how to say it. I think to find some quick wins in transformation. Usually when you are going to do like a transformation project, like a country transformation project or a city transformation project, these are things that they are going to take time. Nevertheless, my secret recipe is to always find some quick wins, right? And for example, because I was just telling you that I'm going through a transformation project with my current role, this is like a 3 years plan of changing like products, changing teams, changing narrative, and so on. Nevertheless, like 3 years, it's a very, very long time. People are, they are, so I said, okay, what can I do in the first month I'm here? That's related to the vision and what I want to do, and people can see. And I just identify like really, really small things that I gave it to the teams, right? So I think it's important to take this, and also because you're also young. I think it's important to also celebrate the wins. Speaking of wins, like quick wins and the big wins, and what a thing I always do with my teams, especially when we are going through like hard projects or long-term project, we always find time to celebrate, either like drinks, let's go for a prosecco, or have a dinner together, or like a pizza if we don't have for anything else, just to mark the moment, just to give another little bit of fuel, energetic fuel to the projects. Because again, transformation, it's long term. You are not, at least from my own experience, you are not going to see transformation in a blink of an eye. So you kind of need to find ways to keep people engaged. Quick wins, celebrations, personal stories, team spirit. This would be if I need to, draw some conclusions based on my personal experience. Okay, I also have here a question for
if I can pause for a second, please. Arne,
yeah, sure.
you had
Yes,
a question?
I wanted to add a question to the question you just responded to.
Yeah, sure.
Because you were mentioning quick wins and big wins, and I was wondering if a team fails to meet a goal or whatever, how do you lead through failure? This would be interesting to me. How do you deal with a period where the team does not specifically meet its goals? How would you act there?
Okay, that's a very great question, and thank you for that. What I would say is that in your life, professional life or personal life, you are going to face failure. And I think this is important to acknowledge that either as a leader or as a contributor, one way or another, you are going to face failure. I had it as a leader, I had it as a contributor. So first and foremost, I would say that it's important to acknowledge and to kind of, I don't know, normalize failure. in the sense that not to say, okay, we can failure and go from fail to fail and nothing happens. No, in the sense that failure should be seen as a way of learning, right? So I had a failure, my team had a failure. Okay, let's see what I can learn from that moment and put it in practice for a future reference. I also think, and this is something, although I myself as a leader, and especially when I was at the beginning of my career, I was a very tough manager, and failure was not an option for me, at least at the beginning. What experience showed me that is that I think it's important as a leader to create an environment where teams and people kind of feel safe to discuss mistakes, I don't know, setbacks, failures of all kinds, without fear or punishment or anything like this. Because if you instill in people this kind of fear, you are going to have the opposite effect. People are going to be more burdened, more fearful, and they won't be as creative and as energized as you like to be. So I would say it's normal to have failures. I think it's important to learn from them. I think it's important to have this kind of psychological safety in our teams that, hey, it's okay to make mistakes and to have setbacks, but it's important to learn from them and try not to repeat them in the future. I also think that, especially nowadays, when everything changes with such fast rhythm, I would frame failure as an opportunity, actually. Hey, we tried, we learned, let's improve something rather than, hide it or be feared. Because at least in this moment, as leaders, we actually don't have the clarity we used to have. So I think it's only normal to give it a little bit of more flexibility to our teams in terms of failures and mistakes. Nevertheless, I would also make like a differentiation between failures, like good failures and bad failures, in the sense that in business or organizations or public administration, I think it's important for you as a leader and for the people, the teams, to kind of clearly distinguish between what's an acceptable failure. I don't know, you took a calculated risk, for example. You brought in some new technology, so you innovated. You made an experiment, or you name it, right? Versus bad failures like repeated negligence, right? Or ethical violations or legal violations, right? These are kind of bad failures, and it's important for people to understand what's good and it's in a learning side, and you have flexibility to understand, and what's bad failure. I think this is really important to have clarity on it. Also, I would actually say that failure can be. I always hear this word. It's called resilience. I hear it everywhere.
Thank you.
But actually,
this is what we
sorry.
do.
Yes, I know. I hear it everywhere, but unlike you, this is what I wanted to say. There are just a couple of people and communities and organizations that actually understand resilience, at least from my point of view, I think failure actually help us with resilience. This is what I wanted to say. And it kind of helps, develop that emotional maturity and resilience we need in the current environment. So this is what I
fail so badly that you cannot move on, that means you have been resilient. If you can preserve the ability to learn after a failure, it means that the essential services are still running. So the system
Yes.
is resilient.
Yes. So long story short, this is my take on failures. And because I mentioned, so when I was younger, I was very tough with my teams and no failure there. Nevertheless, experience taught me that if you think about it as a resilience driver, learning model, innovation model, then it's better to have more flexibility as a manager, especially.
Thank you. Very interesting.
I think it was very good that you made this differentiation between the so-called good failure and the bad failure, because the good failure is something that the team puts a wholeheartedly their whole heart into a project, and they somehow fail, and that's even noble. Okay.
It can
But so
happen. It
often,
can
and your background in public administration certainly has taught you that not always the team is wholeheartedly behind you. And you have to have the means to differentiate between those who are striving and failing and those who don't even try.
definitely.
So
Definitely, and that's a great point, because when we are talking about failures, we are also talking, okay, how much people are invested in the change and how willing are they to make the change, and then we go into their mindsets. So, for example, when we are talking about failures and transformation projects, I think it's also important to work with the mindsets of the people, right? Because if my mindset it's always, hey, I've always done it like this, I don't want to change it, then before failure, before any other things, you kind of need to see how you can change the mindset of that person. And that's another discussion, a very interesting one. But just for you to remember, you might encounter is like the growth mindset. So is that mindset where we are striving to always become better, to improve ourselves. This is the mindset for today, like today's society in this sense, versus the fixed mindset where, hey, this is how I used to do things, this is how I know things, I'm going to do like this. We are living in different times, and I think it's important to each of us, actually, not, it's important to check our mindset and to see what limitations we have and how we can work with them and move a little bit forward, to be able to remain relevant, as I was saying at the beginning, especially as professionals, because the work environment is changing very rapidly. And for example, as a manager or as a leader, I think you need different skills today. You need to understand technology, for example. This wasn't something that you needed 10 years ago, or not in the complexity, the current complexity at least, or other skills, or to be able to coach people, for example. Again, it's a different mindset, it's a different approach of leadership, or the ability to drive international expansion. Again, different set of skills, and we need a growth mindset to be able to do this, especially for ourselves, and then of course for the others. Okay, when you consider expansion into a new international market, what is the deal breaker that will stop you from entering the market? Okay, this is a bit, again, of a more complex thing. I'll just try to briefly answer. If I think about deal breakers, I would definitely think about the predictability and the rule of law, in the sense that if I have regulatory framework that it's unclear, that's subject to very arbitrary enforcement, then, or it's heavily politicized, then I have a very high risk there. So I would think twice if I want to go into that market. Definitely, I would like to think about intellectual property and contracts. It's also like related to the legislation. So basically, how am I going to deal with commercial side? They are reliably enforced. They are not So this would be something I would look at. So this would be, I mean, top of my mind, this would be legislation, ease of doing business, and commercial parts. I'll definitely have a very, very thorough documentation about this, and then of course other things that are related to the business. Then okay, so the question is a little bit more complex. Was China attractive because of or in spite of its rules of business in the past few decades? Are there countries poised to replicate China's success as the world divests from China? Is the drive to divest to invest from China real, or is it just a political posturing? Okay, that's a very interesting question. China is not actually, let's say, in my area of expertise. What I would say, again, based on my knowledge, and take it with a grain of salt, because I'm not an expert on the Chinese market. It's only based on what I know and what I monitor as a manager. I think China was attractive in spite of its local environment, especially legal and the political environment. Not particular, because of its on the positive side. Why I think businesses opened like headquarters in China or had like business there, I think is because kind of they have a market size that's very big. It's very difficult to match it. They had and they have a lot of growth potential. And I also think they have a lot of like a cost efficiency advantages. Nevertheless, if I had a business and had to think if I want to open in China, I would definitely think about their, how am I going to navigate their opaque system and regulations, and this kind of flexible enforcement of the law. I was just reading the other day some news that people from like a consultancy office with offices in China, they were like arrested and they spent like 2 years in the prison. It's a very complicated story there. Other countries, I think, I mean, if I think from
India
a bit,
springs to mind as a
sorry?
region. India springs to mind as a potential next point of
Yes, yes, India can be. I also seen a lot of countries like Mexico, for example, so in this part of the world as well. I think some of them, they are trying to actively, position themselves as attractive investment destinations, especially having in mind all the shifts from US, from China, and all the political tensions. And there was also like another thing. Is it the drive to divest from China real, or is it just a political posturing? Okay. Again, I'm giving an answer based on my experience. I think companies, they want to diversify their supply chains. And I think it's important as a company. Speaking of businesses, I always advocate for having, of not relying on a sole supplier or a sole country of supplying, to have diversity here. So I would say that companies try to manage the risk better. So maybe they are shifting a little bit from China from this perspective. Also, not only in China, I would a little bit expand this, but I think having in mind the geopolitical pressures and regulatory pressures, I think each business is going to reshuffle a little things because this increased tariffs, the increased scrutiny in certain countries, security concerns, right? It kind of impacts the business calculation. And if I would be an owner of business, and we are actually at Totasoft, we are looking into expanding and we are targeting new markets, I would definitely take this into consideration. And in what market should I go in order to diminish this, regulatory pressures? So this would be this question. And a last one, I have here a last question. When do you think it will be safe to invest in Ukraine? Is it safe now or with the war going on? What would you need to see? How would things need to be confident in investing there? Is there anything that we could do now that would prepare us for the eventual end of the war and expedite the flow of investment to Ukraine? Okay, very interesting story. Very interesting question again. I know a little bit the market in Ukraine in the sense that when I was at the OTP group, OTP has a very important presence with banking and leasing in Ukraine. And I've been in touch with my former colleagues there during the war as well, and both personal and professional. Okay, the blunt answer to this question would be, from my perspective, it's kind of risky to invest right now in Ukraine. It's still an active conflict at the end of the day. And if I would think further on, I don't know what you mean by investment. So the person who asked the question, what does it mean by investment, in the sense that you would invest there like your money, or you open a business, or you go there. But if I look at like in a general way, I would assume that the next investment in a general approach should be more in the humanitarian ways, infrastructure. Because the war unfortunately destroyed a lot of infrastructure. Having in mind the hybrid war, so I'll definitely look into investing or developing things in cybersecurity and online security. This would be some things I would look into, not very large scale commercial investments. This would be my take on this question. And definitely, if I would look to invest in Ukraine in a general way speaking, and assuming the war is over, I would definitely have a look at their reconstruction strategy. Is it coherent? Is it internationally supported? Do they have in mind economic recovery? Are there any credible financial organizations or banks that are backing this plan? So I would definitely look at the reconstruction strategy if I were to go there after the war and invest or open a business or do certain things with the Ukrainian market. This would be my take on that. I hope it answers, or at least gives a perspective for the question.
Thank you. Any questions that we have now besides the questions that have already been asked in writing? If not, I would like to ask a question. So we have this old question from Machiavelli. Should a leader aim to be loved or feared? What's your take? Because that's the kind of question that you can take into politics, into business, into NGO, into any kind of team that you're leading.
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you so much. Actually, I love Machiavelli. I mean, his writings, and I think it's a mandatory reading for anyone working in a management position, not only politics. So definitely give it a try to read the book. To answer your question, okay. I think it remains relevant. I mean, I think, and it's a little bit even more relevant if we think about the role models we have right now, or the leadership models we have, like Trump, Elon Musk, China, Putin. So definitely, it's a a relevant question in today's world. Nevertheless, I would give it a little bit of nuance to it, in the sense that, okay, fear can drive this kind of short-term compliance, but it's not sustainable in the long term. And if my teams or my people, right, if we are talking about citizens, they are governed by fear, they are going to perform usually only to the minimum required level, hesitate to innovate, hesitate to do a lot of things, and kind of tend to withhold critical information. Just think about the, autocratic governments and autocratic leaders, right? People fear to go to them with certain things. And from my point of view, as a leader in the modern world, you kind of need to be able to grasp on the information. I would say, speaking of switching perspectives, I would actually say that I would aim as a leader for respect. So neither love, neither fear. Love also not, in the sense of a family. And this is something I hear in certain situations, that especially in companies or teams in companies, that, hey, we're like a family here. I don't strive for that as well, because a family is a different social construct. My favorite joke is that I don't go home to my husband, I say, hey, you are fired, right? I don't do that. I am giving you an extreme example, but this is why I say, like, love in the social understanding, or the family love, I don't strive for it in business. I strive, of course, for understanding, for even for friendship, right? To have a good partnership, a good friendship. So an answer to your question, I would say it's respect. So I think as leaders in the modern world, I think we should instill respect in people. So not love, not not fear, but respect. And respect, I think it's kind of built on trust, trust that comes from this ability to communicate and to share also, like, very sensitive information, sensible information. I also think respect relies on integrity, relies on fairness, even decisiveness. Sorry, so being decisive. Sorry. Yeah. So this is what I would say. I would strive for respect. If I need to answer this type of question, I would say respect. So basically, neither of them. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. Yes. Thank you for that. No, so thank you so much, Ms. Moraru. These have been some very important lessons that we have taken from your personal experience, and from your views about leadership, and about just leading people towards a goal that they understand and that they accept as being a good one for the team. These are lessons that our young leaders are definitely going to take to heart and apply when they are called upon to do their projects in the second part of their program. So again, thank you so much, Ms. Moraru. These have been very important lessons.
Thank you. I highly hope you kind of get, you were able to get some useful information for you, and more than useful, to be able to use it, because at the end of the day, this is important, to use the information. Thank you so much for joining. As I said at the beginning of our call, it's actually my honor to be with you here, and I'm very impressed with what you do, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you. I'm actually looking forward to meeting you in your future roles. Why not? I work a lot with the public administration and public affairs people, so maybe we are going to be able to meet in Romania or in other countries. It would be my real pleasure. If you have other questions or if you have any other ideas you'd like to share, feel free to reach me via LinkedIn. You can easily find me, and I'm always available for, sharing or, at least brainstorming some ideas, especially for young people like you. So feel free to reach out at any time. I'm more than happy to contribute.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
everybody, see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.